You didn't give me a countdown.
No, I did give you a countdown. We're rolling live.
Awesome.
Winging it.
All right, so
No, I'll introduce.
Oh.
All right, guys, we're sitting here with RedpoleQ at one of our favorite restaurants, Butterfinger Pancakes in Gangnam. And
for those of you who don't know, Gangnam is a place in Seoul,
and it's amazing.
Best girls in all of Korea.
And we really just have a couple of follow-up questions regarding a couple of the articles that were written on the site. They have to do with bringing value as a way to win friends and influence people. So one of us had a question about neediness when you're bringing value. So basically, how do you bring value without looking needy?
So let me first back up, because the reason I started writing this article in the first place is because one of the guys asked about whether reading that book would be helpful in terms of getting women. That book is How to Win Friends and Influence People, a very famous book written in the 30s, I think, by Dale Carnegie. He interviewed a bunch of sort of famous people and tried to figure out what the secret to their success was, and one of it was their relationships they built. And so we investigated and came with this book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a classic. Pretty much everybody should read it, just because it's, you know, a foundational book. It's like reading, you know, Shakespeare or something. You know, you read Shakespeare not because you necessarily love Shakespeare, but you want to have a good foundation in British or English literature, that you just have to read Shakespeare, or in culture in general. Anyway, so that got me thinking, because there was a little bit of a discussion about it on one of our chat groups that we have. And while that book is definitely worth reading, it's not really a book that's going to help you that much in terms of getting women. Because the skill set for meeting women and the skill set for getting girls, while they overlap somewhat, are very different. There's a lot of guys that are very skilled socially and get no play. And there are other guys, and a lot of guys actually, a lot of the best guys that I know, while you wouldn't say they were socially awkward, they're not like warm people that, like, you know, everybody, like other dudes want to hang out with all the time either. But they're masters at getting girls. So there are some principles that are similar, and that one of them is the concept of bringing value. Value can come in many forms. It can be advice. It can be just time that you spend with someone. It could be jokes. I mean, think about anything that people pay for. Entertainment, knowledge, anything that people pay for is value. Obviously, there's lots of things that are value that we don't pay for. Love, affection. A lot of times, if you pay for it, then it loses its value. For some people, that would include things like sex, where, you know, if you pay for it now, it's not really worth it. So, yummy.
Looks delicious.
Yeah, it is. First time I've had macaroni in a long time. Right. So, one of the questions was, how do you bring value without seeming needy? My tea has arrived. I think these potatoes need a bit of ketchup on them. Hook them up. I don't really like these new bottles, because like the ketchup just shoots out at 200 miles an hour, and before you know it, you have a huge pile of ketchup everywhere. It's really not cool. Anyway, so this is is a trap that a lot of guys fall into when they start out dating, especially if they watch a lot of like, you know, like Disney movies. You see this thing where guys are doing a lot of things for a girl. And so then guys try and do that in dating. And they're like, yeah, bringing value. However, unfortunately, women are not quite so simple. And so, one of the key things is that, oh, I need this guy to bring us some sugar. One of the key things is, about before you bring someone value, before you can bring someone value, is they have to be open to it. And that means in a lot of forms, right? A lot of people are like women. And I think this is because of reciprocity. I don't know if you're familiar with the, are you familiar with reciprocity?
I guess it's the idea where if you give something to somebody, then they feel kind of an obligation to bring something back to you.
Right, exactly. So when you do things for someone, you automatically start to trigger that. And because of that, the person has to be somewhat open to being sort of burdened with this feeling of reciprocity before they'd be willing to accept value. So this is the mistake that a lot of guys make early on in the dating game, is that the guy himself is not perceived as being high enough value that the person is willing to be indebted to them, even in a small way. And then usually most guys, then they pile it on, and then that makes it even worse. This is actually a general problem in relationships. There's a book which I don't really recommend reading, but it has, because the concept is so simple that it's not worth reading. But it makes a very good point. It talks about, it's called the passion trap. And it's geared more towards relationships than anything else, but primarily what it was saying in the passion trap is that at any given time in the relationship, one person is more desirable than the other person. And usually what happens is, and that can be for any number of reasons. It could be because, you know, if you're dating someone and then like, if you're a guy, you're dating a girl, and you lose your job, then suddenly your value decreases, and you feel the other person's value is much higher. And what happens then normally is that one of the persons gets really needy and emotional because they realize, oh, you know what, there's this danger I could lose this person. And so they respond by really piling things on, and that generally makes matters worse because it puts a large burden on the other person, and so they try to withdraw to create more distance. So it creates this really bad dynamic, and I think we've discussed this before with your girl. Is that right?
Enlighten me. I can't remember this.
I think on a few occasions, because you were talking about how you feel that your girl can be quite needy. And I think maybe I didn't, and I should have. But anyway, and so the tendency is to do that, just that, when they become needy, to like create more distance or run away.
So I'm not giving her enough value in return, so she becomes more needy.
Right, exactly. So guys have to be very careful about creating a dynamic when you start to get good and women. Right, so I think there's this reciprocity thing. I know that I've experienced this on multiple occasions when I've been approached on like the street or something, and not by a girl, unfortunately, usually by a guy.
That's awkward.
And he offers to do something for you, you know, tell you your fortune, or I don't know, it could be any number of things. And he's trying to do this to like make it so you feel you have to do something in return. I know I've felt this many times, and you have to like resist this urge because you feel bad for the person having done something, even if it's something you didn't want. A great, you know, if you live in any major cities in the U.S., a lot of times there's these like people who will like come up to your car and try and wash the windows. They'll wash them and then they'll ask for money after the fact. and you feel sort of like you kind of almost have to give them money. That's an example. So essentially, a lot of people when you try to give value in the wrong way, then there's the risk of creating that dynamic where the other person feels bad, and so instead of wanting to be with you more, they start to detach.
So that would be in the concept of, or in the context of relationships, correct?
Relationships with anybody, really, though. I mean, when you first meet someone, just like I was talking about with the window washers, you could easily induce that if you go about giving them value in the wrong way. Now, one of the things that triggers that is a feeling that you want something immediate. So in this case, right, person comes and wash their windows, and then immediately after they want money.
Yeah.
And you resent them for that.
In Vancouver, they love to hold the door open when you're going somewhere.
Right. And you don't think, oh, this is a nice person. You think, oh, they're manipulating my natural human emotions.
Yeah.
And it makes you frustrated and angry, right?
Yeah.
And resentful.
Yeah.
And it makes you want to avoid them. So I think one of the keys to not being needy is that you don't really want anything in return, or rather, you don't care if you get something in return.
So isn't this a huge problem though? Because guys are going up to girls, trying to start conversations in a fun way, trying to give them some sort of value, whether it's a laugh or a smile, or something that's non-material or material even. But isn't that just a problem? Because the girl's just going to be like, wow, I don't want any part of this. You're trying to manipulate me.
But I would argue that this is an example of how going for a phone number can be bad. Because it's like, I did this stuff, now please give me your phone number. Whereas when you set it up so that you're trying to set the time range, so you're setting the next meet, it's not, okay, now you're going to give me value. It's, I'm going to give you more value, essentially, right? You're not asking for anything in return. And ideally, it's something that you're going to do anyway. It's like, oh yeah, my friends are having a party this weekend if you want to come. Right? When you set that, it's like you're giving her an opportunity to experience more bonuses. Now, obviously, it's value to you if she comes, but the idea is that already you have something happening. See, it's not about her, it's about the event.
And this is why it's so important to seed during the conversations. Talk about things that you're doing, or cool places that you are going to go, or that you love. And then you can just bring her along, give her additional value.
Right. I mean, the circus is going to roll on with or without her.
Yeah.
And she can choose to come or not. So I would say that's one of the main things. You have, at this point, if she shows up, right? So let me actually back it up and compare it to the previous version. In the previous version, if they hold the door for you, you go through it. Well, one aspect is you could have held the door yourself. You can wash the window yourself. Right? They hold the door, right? So that's the first thing. Second thing is that now they want something from you.
Yeah.
And you didn't, in a certain sense, you didn't really have you were put in this reciprocating position, again, kind of against your will.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case where you're having an interaction with the girl, she's staying because she's enjoying that interaction.
Yeah.
Right. So she can leave at any time, as we know they do.
Yeah.
Sometimes at a full sprint.
In heels.
In heels. And so, I need a spoon too. These guys, man, they're just messing up the rotation. I'm gonna get it together. I'll just use my fork, I guess.
So, in the context of meeting women, then, you're giving them value, and you're not asking for anything in return. You're going to give them more value. But
yeah, essentially.
In order to
so the value that they're providing in this context is kind of incidental on their part. Right? They don't have to do anything actively. They just have to be there.
Yeah.
So that takes off a lot of pressure.
and then they get value in return that they want.
Right.
But in order to accept your value in the first place, they would have to see you as a valuable person, correct?
They have to not see you as a threat. I would say. I wouldn't say, I mean, and you know, and I think that's kind of in some ways more important because essentially, yeah, I mean, I'd say they primarily have to not see you as a threat. And so that's where all this stuff about body language comes into play. As long as they don't see you as a threat, as long as you don't trigger their like flight response.
So don't trigger their flight response.
Right, as long as you don't trigger their flight response, then then they just have a fun interaction. Now they may not think it's so great that they want to like see you again necessarily, but they don't walk away going, "Oh my God, that was the worst 3 minutes of my life."
So, just in like 2 sentences, what is a flight response?
Okay, so humans, when threatened, when they feel threatened, okay, that's an important distinction because you cannot be threatened but feel threatened. And this is a great example is guys who, when they have approach anxiety, right? They feel threatened. There is no actual threat, but they feel threatened, and so they have trouble approaching girls. All right, so what happens is that, and actually this is very interesting, and this is something that Trailblazer actually brought to my attention. There's actually 2 kinds of responses, or 2 pairs of responses. So one is the male response, which is I shouldn't say the only. There's 2 pairs of responses. One is the fight-flight response. So when threatened, you can make a run for it, or you can fight off that threat. You can face that threat and try and fight it off. But there's another more recent one that I guess psychologists developed, or maybe evolutionary psychologists. I'm not really sure. But anyway, when Trailblazer brought it to my opinion, I brought it to my attention. I looked it up on the internet. And the other one is called Tend and Befriend. And this is considered to be more of a female way to handle threats. And it means like you tend to the other people that are around you, make sure everyone is okay. And befriend means you try and make alliances, new alliances. But in any case, the fight or flight response. So when you trigger a fear in someone else, and it's not hard to do, right? I mean, if you approach someone and you start and you're too close to them, for example, if you approach someone and you're too close to them, or if you're not smiling, this is a really interesting one. So studies show that women prefer men who aren't smiling. They find them more attractive. However, these are studies done online. I don't think they would feel the same way about this unsmiling man walking over to them and being like, "Hi." They say that smiling is supplicating, but that's actually good when you're a male who's a threat in general to a woman and you approach with supplicating body language. Now, when I say supplicating body language, I'm only going as far as a smile. Right, I'm not advocating any more supplication than that. In fact, I'm against any other form of supplication besides smiling and leaning back a bit. Okay, so yeah, so what was I saying about, because you asked me about the fight or flight thing.
Yeah, just what the fight or flight response was.
Right, but that was part of something else I was talking about.
I think where we were was, yes, bringing value.